All right. These are the topics I had in here this week. So to start off with, we're gonna have to address this one, I guess. It found out in the CLT call last week that BlueJeans is apparently going to shut down. Find other pad from last week. CLT call. Yeah, so I guess somehow this is BlueJeans room that we use. It's like some universal room that they do all the recording and stuff on. And I guess this room, is what I've heard, is not going to work anymore as of April 1st. So we have to migrate over something else. And so in the CLT call, they discuss Google Meet and Jitsi as the alternatives. And then it seems like people are leaning towards Jitsi because Google Meet has like permissions issues, and you have to like have a Google account to go on there and everything. And so people, I don't know, it seems like everyone's going to try to move over to Jitsi. We at least already have a Jitsi room that we use for the stand-up. There I have it linked, the notes there. So I guess the plan is to move over to that room.
Is it only me? But I lost you for the last 10 seconds, more or less.
Was it? I mean, I can't tell if did anyone else lose me for a bit.
I don't think so. I joined a little late though.
All right. Well, what did you last hear, Ritter? I can repeat myself. Unless you can't hear me now. I'm not sure. Oh. Anyway, the idea is it's pretty straightforward. We have to move off of the BlueJeans meeting. Jitsi is sort of the obvious thing to go to. So we already have it sort of set up. The only thing that's going to be hard is we have to figure out how to do recordings on Jitsi. I don't know how to do that right now. I don't know if anyone's totally figured that out right now. My Prez was talking about it a little bit in the CLT call, and it seemed like there was something with Dropbox we have to do where the recording ends up there. I think we said we were going to have to manually trigger the recording, not going to do it automatically like it does in this room right now. So we'll have to figure that stuff out, but again, we sort of have to. It's just kind of forced, so we'll have to do it. I expect there's going to be a few weeks where we just don't have the recording while we get things sort of sorted, and then it'll be back to normal a little bit. After that, we'll just have to make sure we set up the recording ourselves. Happens. And then the question to actually ask here is, do we actually want to use BlueJeans next week as well? Because it should still work next week, and the recording will get all set up and everything. Or we could try to do Jitsi. I don't think I'll figure out recording stuff by next week, but just try to transition to the room. So I don't have a strong preference. Maybe I lean very slightly towards BlueJeans just because I know the recording will work next week as well if we use that. But I don't know if anyone has any preference what we do. Doesn't seem like it. So in that case, I'll also say we'll just use BlueJeans next week. And then we'll try to transition to Jitsi as soon as we have to, the week after. Like I said, we'll have to figure out the recordings, but it's not a big deal if we have a few weeks that are missing recordings. The second topic, I said we're done with that one now, is this topic on universal timeouts for Ceph ADM commands. So we had a tracker for that a while ago. You can see it's quite old at this point. We talked about we want to do this. And I don't remember the exact issue we had that was causing things to time out back then, but there's been numerous ones over the last couple of years that have popped up here and there that could maybe cause one of these things to fail. And so the idea is that we had a universal timeout, we could just raise a help warning saying that there is a timeout, and then the user could go investigate maybe why the command fails or something. Usually it's something like out of our control, like had Ceph volume process go into D state because of hanging mount points. We've had nodes that have no space left in their root file system, so the command just hangs trying to get I/O out. Things like that are sort of hard for us to deal with on our own, but we can at least warn people about it, because right now it just sits there forever and it doesn't do anything. So we wanted to do that for a while, and then I have this proof of concept pull request up over here. And this one goes through 3 approaches on how we could address this. And it has 12 bits that add some extra stuff as well. So for the most part, if you want to look at the 3 things, this one is a very simple one, adding the timeout flag to the Ceph binary. There's this one, second commit adds a sort of thread system we're doing it. It's basically spawns a separate thread that has a timeout on it. And then this new one I just added in this morning uses async IO. It's a little bit messy because this commit removes the stuff for the thread-based one. But I was trying to get it so that if you look at the end of this commit, you can sort of see, at least in the parts that are added, what it would look like with one of those. And then I put in the other pad some of the thoughts about the 3 different things. So say, for example, the timeout flag in the binary, I don't think will totally cover everything we want, because it only does a timeout on the actual calls, which I don't think would catch all the cases that we've hit before. That's kind of why we went for something a bit stronger. But I also had this little note in here that maybe we would want to go back and implement something like that, like an actual proper global timeout eventually. It is still probably a little bit trickier because we're now talking about having to kill the actual process or break out of the actual process that's hung, instead of having to break out of our SSH connection to the host that is running that process. So it might be, I don't know, more straightforward to do it in the manager module, but maybe we could also think about doing that after. Then there is, so there's a thread method here. The thread method, it's a bit heavy and it is a bit weird going along with our async IO stuff we already have, because the async SSH requires us to have a bunch of these async functions everywhere. And because we're putting the timeout on the SSH commands, we would have to basically be spawning threads that then call the async functions. And so you see that they have multiple layers of functions in there, because say threads can take async functions as a target. So you have to have the thread take a wrapper function that then calls another async thing afterwards. And there's a weird way you have to handle the return values and the exceptions and stuff that you see in that patch there. If you look through it a little bit, basically you have to pass an immutable object to the thread so that it can then put the results or the exceptions in, and it works. It did at least work when I tested it. All the things timed out properly, and the health warnings got raised. But it's just a bit of an uglier implementation. And then the last one was using the async IO. This one looks pretty straightforward, actually. We got into it because it turns out that what we already had, it was pretty easy just to pass a timeout when the future that we generate originally, when we do you call the results function on it, it can technically take a timeout. And so all it took was really adding a timeout into one of our internal functions that, I'll just go look at it. I have it here. We already had this internal function in sh.py, this get result here, and it already called this sort of result function here. And so all it really took was passing in a timeout there. And it seems to just sort of work. And there's obviously a little bit of plumbing around it as well. Then you just get one of these timeout errors. And you at least this one, unlike the thread one where I currently just sort of lets the thread hang out afterwards, doesn't try to do anything with it, we can actually cancel the future. We know that it's stopped as well. It does cause a little bit of an issue with errors handling, because this actually spits out a big other traceback in the logs, because the async SSH process I was running in that future that we just canceled basically gets an exception when we do that. It's one of these canceled errors. So I have to do something about that. But otherwise, it seems pretty straightforward. It's a much smaller patch than the thread ones. And then the rest of the pull request is just adding some test commands. You can see the 3 cases I tried testing. Basically, it's one that just sort of sleeps for 90 seconds and comes back. It's So basically a normal thing that just, it returns normally, but it took too long. There's one that sleeps for 90 seconds and then throws an exception. And the idea with that one is something that takes too long but also is going to eventually hit an error. And then there's one that just keeps sleeping forever. That one's just one that hangs, obviously. And so the point was just to test those three cases and make sure they all correctly time out and they get the health warning raised, which they do in both the thread-based and the async IO case. And now that I've talked for like 10 minutes, the whole point is just sort of intro all these lessons that we've come with so far, and then sort of try to pick one here that we can move forward with. I'll be honest, I think at this point, I'm probably leaning towards the async IO stuff. It looks like it was a bit simpler to implement that way. And I think it's easier to cancel a feature than it is to worry about killing the thread, which you'd probably want to do. And the result handling is easier, and the exception handling is a bit easier. So I'd like that one, but I'd put that pull request so people can look at what they sort of looks like, and I don't know, decide what they think themselves. Let me go back to
So I generally like the async IO implementation a little bit better, but the one thing that I was a little bit concerned about is we're adding these additional options for the testing in the Ceph ADM binary. And the usage of that is already too large, it feels like. Is there any way we can patch that into the manager? Like maybe into the run Ceph ADM command or override the Ceph ADM binary in the manager for those test cases?
you mean like those sleep 90 seconds things?
Yeah.
I mean, the plan was I was going to just remove those commits entirely. I wasn't planning to actually keep those around anywhere. They were just there to show you what it is, and then once we've picked one of these methods we want to use, I was going to just delete them.
Oh, okay, cool. But we're still going to add some unit tests. And
Yeah, I'll have some actual tests around it. But I didn't want to write tests for like the cases and then be like, all right, actually, I'm going to remove,
Yeah,
these.
maybe I don't know how easy this is since the manager module always typically runs Ceph ADM. But if you had had a kind of keyword arg dependency injection kind of approach to run like a different command, then you could just run like sleep or something on the other side. Then you wouldn't have to hack Ceph ADM. Just a thought.
Yeah, I mean, I could probably even in theory just run, like have the actual command it runs be like that. Like that. Maybe that's what you were saying actually. Is like it could just run sleep or something. I just
Right.
wanted to have it be more closer to like the original
Mm-hmm.
sort of setup. And I think also when I was also trying to test the just timeout flag as well. Probably doesn't do anything there because we don't use call for that in that case.
No,
We could, I guess. But.
I'm kind of more riffing off of Mike's point, which is when we want to have permanent tests. So I agree, you don't necessarily want these like special debug commands in Ceph ADM, but you want to write your unit tests in such a way that they're, realistic. So.
Yeah. The also tricky part is that we almost always end up having to patch out the like run Ceph ADM command in the engine module unit tests. But I mean, I could also patch that with something that like times out and then give it like a 1 second timeout and then have the command sleep for 2 seconds or something. And just basically have run Ceph ADM do that. So there's ways I could do the unit test that'll actually be a bit more proper and to test the timeout. But this was supposed to be like as close to like a real example as I could, which obviously we can't merge that in.
Right.
But I wanted to sort of show like that I've tried all three cases that I think of anyway. Again, it returns normally after the timeout, it throws an error after the timeout, and it never returns ever. And just make sure that all three of those work. And I don't know if there's a good way to do that with the unit tests, test at that level. So I wanted to at least try it once so that it sort of works. And then we won't have, I guess, full integration testing around that stuff probably, but maybe we actually could. It's probably possible. I think there's a function actually. Is there a Ceph ADM call? Oh, maybe it's worth putting in. The reason I thought we had like a command that could like call arbitrary stuff, but I don't think we do.
You could use the shell command for the Ceph ADM binary and
That's
then
true. We
inject
can
the
have
type.
arbitrary stuff in there.
Yeah.
Yeah, that could be a way. We can maybe have like an actual integration test that runs shell commands that sleep or something. And it could even like be like, because if it's a full integration, it could even maybe sit there for like 10 minutes or something. You don't need it to be only 1 minute. Just an actual like long running test. That's definitely a possibility. I could do an integration test like that. It just eventually calls a shell command with sleep in it or something, and then make sure it times out. I'd have to think a little bit about where that's getting called from, that it would catch the exception and raise a proper health warning, but I think it's probably doable. Anyway, that was like the stuff I was going to get into here. I was more just like, what do people think of like these different ideas? And like, do people, I guess, agree that the async IO one looks a bit nicer than Red one?
Yeah, I mean, as we discussed this yesterday, I think you already know my opinion leans towards the async IO as well.
Even I was looking up a little bit stuff about this, there were people talking about how it's tends to be hard to write good code when you mix threading and the async IO stuff a bit
Right.
as well. I was running that myself. I had really trouble implementing that threaded patch, the second one, because I was having issues with the mixture of those two things originally. Yeah, I mean, if people don't have that many opinions, I guess it seems like the async IO one is nicer. I don't know, I might just move forward with that one and try to actually implement some proper test cases around it.
Sounds good.
Add that into it. Right. And that's sort of it, I guess, for that topic. I guess it's mostly again about picking out what we sort of want to do for the approach. And then as far as the tests and stuff, that's just more of an implementation detail I'll have to sort of work through. But it's not something I think that needs like a ton of discussion unless it ends up being harder than I expect it to be. I guess we can end on that one. And that was all I had for topics myself. Does anyone have anything else I want to talk about in here? Another topic? All right. In that case, I guess we can end here. Yeah, thanks for coming, discussing the threading stuff. And next week we'll still be on the Blue Jeans meeting. But the week after, I guess, just make sure to, I don't know, remember this link. I'll try to update the calendar entry right after the meeting next week. In the Ceph calendar, the Ceph community one, to wait to this one. But like, if you have like a copy of the meeting on your own personal calendar, like I think I do, might not update on its own. You might have to update it yourself, just so people are aware of that. So next week it'll still be Blue Jeans, and the week after on the Jitsi. Yeah, well, we'll end here. So yeah, thanks for coming, and I'll see you guys next week.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye.
Have a good day. Bye.
Bye.